Nobody seems to understand each other. You know, we are fighting each other. You know, and I mean, what I mean by that is politically. You know, that's why the city can't come together, because politicians can't even come together.
Obviously, a lot of people feel strongly about the city's financial situation right now.
Sandra wants to know, Governor Snyder, why have you not honored the revenue sharing agreement between Detroit and Lansing? Touch on that for a bit.
Yeah, well, that was, there's the history of that agreement, in theory, goes back to Governor Engler and then Governor Granholm. So it's something I've spent some time doing some homework, so I pulled the information together and I'm happy to analyze it. And I've told people I'm happy to have people continuing to ask the question. But how I would view the best time to answer that is not today. Because it's not simply about putting more money in the city. It's about making sure we can have a discussion about what really transpired, what could be owed, what might make sense, but let's do it in the context of a positive solution. Because I think what everyone wants in Detroit is to see implementation of actions happen, where good things are going on. And the question then is could there be additional resources to invest to make that even go better and faster, as opposed to simply saying, you know, we're delaying doing the reforms that we really need to do. And the city's been very good about wanting to work on those. We just want to be supportive in helping implement those things and help on the financial issue.
Deputy Mayor, you said kind of the same thing a minute ago, that money is not all the problem, that there are other problems, but the city did just approve a bond issue to which the governor's office replied it's a Band-Aid. Mm-hmm. So to what degree is money going to be necessary to make any agreement work?
Well, the $137 million bond deal is definitely important, but it creates the runway of cash so that we can implement all the plans that we have to do. And so it's important to have that runway so we can pay the bills, pay payroll, but when we get down to it, we really have to structurally change the city. And that means some investments. For example, payroll. The payroll system, we have 3 old payroll systems. We need one latest and greatest technology payroll system, and that's going to save us money. It's going to reduce head count. It's going to make us more efficient, and that's just one example of kind of an investment that's necessary to move Detroit to where we want to be.
One quick question. I know we have to move on to social media, but Governor, what is your drop-dead deadline for this consent agreement, financial stability agreement, whatever you want to call it, or an emergency manager?
Yeah, it's next Thursday, the 5th.
Bottom line.
Well, that's what the statute requires, and I have to do my job.
Okay, we'll explain some more about how that mechanism is going to work in a minute. First of all, we want you to join the conversation. Facebook, Twitter, and Detroit2020.com.
Before the break, though, we asked a poll question. What is the best option for Detroit?
Dave Llewellyn's monitoring social media. And Dave, what are people telling you about that?
Well, Stephen, Carolyn, thank you very much. A lot of discussion on Detroit2020.com, also Twitter and on Facebook tonight. And just before the break, we asked that question. Do you think Detroit needs A, an emergency manager, B, a consent agreement, or C, a financial stability agreement? And right now, the poll results show the emergency manager is leading at 85%, the financial stability agreement at 8%, the consent agreement at 8% as well. So those who are chiming in, who are contributing to our chat at Detroit2020.com, they're saying to us that they think the EM, the emergency manager, is the preferable way for the city of Detroit to go. As we mentioned, we've got the live chat going on at Detroit2020.com, and among some of the comments that have been made there, we've got a comment from Danny. The lack of jobs in Detroit for the unskilled is sure lacking. And another comment from Wilbert on our chat on Detroit2020.com. What are you doing to cut the cost of car insurance and crime? So a lot of comments, a lot of questions as well. And a question here for the governor, also for the deputy mayor. There's been a lot of talk this week about renegotiated union contracts. Some have said they're not worth the paper that they're written on. Is there talk of going back to the bargaining table in regards to union contracts? And I'd start first with the deputy mayor.
Well, we negotiated TAs, which I think was historic, because our unions did not have to open up their contracts, and they did. And we went through and we dealt with the health care issue, we dealt with the pension issue, we also dealt with the wage issue. Now, one of the challenges we have is on the work rules. And so I think the difference that between where the state is and where the city is that we didn't go far enough, in the state's opinion, on the work rules.
Governor, some council members even today were expressing that no matter what level we're talking about, emergency manager, financial stability agreement, whatever you want to call it, it's all just code for union busting.
Yeah, it's not. And I'm happy to look at the track record that we were successful at the state level of doing 2 collective bargaining agreements with our own team, with our own people. And that's actually some of the background we're using to look at these agreements, to say these agreements that the city have historically had were much more difficult to work with than what we've been working with at the state level successfully. So in some ways we're trying to bring some of the practices that are working well at the state of Michigan to Detroit to say, here are some ideas to share on how we could carry forward and do things. And I'd just like to make a comment on a couple of the other things that Dave was talking, if that was okay, about
Absolutely.
Investing dollars, because it ties back into that. And Kirk made a good comment about wanting a new payroll system, for example. That one of the challenges there could be work rules on putting a new payroll system in terms of how you might do that. Because we're happy to go across Michigan and try to identify who has a great system or our system, and could we bring that to Detroit, and could we move quickly to do that. And a challenge could be is if we got bogged down on work rules to say, you know, the form has to look a certain way or other things, and I appreciate labor may come around very well to say that's okay. But given the circumstance, we would try to go as quickly as possible and move very quickly rather than having it take too long. So those are cases where those things are very important. And there are ways we're investing in Detroit, and we want to do that. I appreciate the one person's comment about the structurally unemployed. In my special message on public safety, I proposed a $20 million package between at-risk youth and structurally unemployed people for 4 cities that primary focus, including Detroit. So we do want to invest, and we're putting resources aside to look at that.
All right. Well, throughout the history of the city, as we're all well aware, and its dealings with the state, there have always been comments that this is all racially motivated.
Yes, here's what City Councilman Kwame Kenyatta said during discussions at the City Council table.
If you're going to have a partnership with us, Mr. Governor, then let's have a partnership. Let's not have a master-slave relationship. Don't treat us different than you treat any other city in the state of Michigan or any other state in the U.S.
Governor, what's your comment on that, as well as the Reverend Jesse Jackson being at the table there today?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, because there's a long history of racial issues, and that's something we do need to be sensitive about, and we can't take for granted. Again, that goes back to the issue of trust and building relationships. If you step back and look at the situation, though, of the communities that have emergency managers, the common issue is, or even a consent agreement, the common issue is typically population decline. There are communities that lost a lot of people and needed to right-size the size of the city and how they operate to go with that. If you look at Detroit, in 1970, it had over 1.5 million people. The last census was 714,000. It declined by over 50%. So those are the kind of things we want to be supportive of, because the answer to solve the issues long-term on the financial side is to see that 714 start going back up again in terms of more people being in Detroit. And that's the question I often ask people is, what are we doing to make sure people in Detroit are excited and want to stay in Detroit, and what are we doing to attract people to move into Detroit? And so that's where we need to keep in all this discussion and dialogue. Are those encouraging people to come to Detroit or not come?
And one other quick question, Governor. When Dave Llewellyn was talking about social media, and he spoke about a percentage, more than 80% of people saying they want an emergency manager in the city of Detroit. Is that what you're hearing when you're talking to citizens in the city of Detroit? Are people coming up to you and saying, we want an emergency manager? What are you really hearing?
Well, there's a wide cross-section. There isn't one answer. I'm getting a lot of different opinions, but the main thing that I hear, not so much on that, but the one thing that comes loud and clear is people want better services in the city. And again, I appreciate the city's working hard on that. That's why we want to support them more, but people want better public safety. They want lighting, they want transit, they want more and better job opportunities. And the best way to do that is to have additional resources by us partnering together for mutual success.
Is it tough to go to the table, though, when you got Mr. Kenyatta saying things like that?
No, I think there are a variety of opinions that we're going to have at the table. It's really about coming to the table, sitting at the table, and negotiating these issues. And I think that's what we're doing. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion and talk and speculation about the mayor and the city council can't get along. We get along. We do work together. We have some differences, which is only natural. And so I think that this kind of dialogue is healthy.
All right, still ahead on Detroit 2020 Interactive Special.
Where Detroit is heading and how you might be able to help out the city.